Top 5 Big 12 observations. We're going to go through the conferences this week. I've already done several. I do that because I care about Emory and his time, and he can work ahead.
Emory kept me from bleeding to death earlier today.
So, hey, look, he's a hero. I mean, honestly, it's like firefighters and doctors and nurses and Emory. Like that's who it is. Top 5 Big 12 observations. Number 5, Baylor and Tech certainly shot life into their seasons. It could have been very bad for them if they were both playing this game at 1-4, because even then, the winner is still not necessarily the winner in the game of life when it comes to the Big 12 season, because that becomes a game that is really, really bad. And look, 2-3 at 2-3 has some more juice to it, but neither of their problems may have been completely solved this last week, but at least they got a win, and this is not 1-4 and 1-4.
Yeah, I mean, there would have been no way to kind of put lipstick on that pig if that would have been the case. But both of them coming off of wins, you're right, it adds a little something to it. Now somebody's going to be 500. After all that either one's been through, somebody's going to be 500. They're going to have 2-1 record in the Big 12. They're going to be halfway to bowl eligibility at the halfway mark of the season. So, yeah, I think it's a big game, and that's not even counting Joey versus Aranda and, the old staff versus this staff and some of those, like, other things that we can talk about. But, yeah, I mean, Tech, they had their hands full with Houston there for a little while like that. They separated in the second half, and they had the lead at halftime, but, posted the shutout in the second half. Houston, man, there's some struggles there. I mean, I don't know how long Hogo is for this whole Cougars thing, but
we'll get to them in a sec.
Yeah, okay. But yeah, I mean, Baylor obviously a historic win, so both of them really needed that, and it came at just the right time, and definitely adds some sizzle to the game this weekend for supporters and just outside observers.
Number 4, take Neil Brown out the hot seat. Take him off. Take him off. He's 4-1. Everybody thought he would be 1-4.
Oh yeah,
he's 4-1. And there are probably people out there that thought he might lose to Duquesne. But he's 4-1.
Now that's first-class hating right there.
Yeah.
I'm not even going to give him a Duquesne game. That's a first-class hater.
There were so many people. And look, he was very confident. Like, sometimes you can tell coaches are, like, trying to tell you what their narrative is because they've got to sell it to the team so that they can sell it to you, then they can sell it to them, and on and on and on and on. But he was very confident and very ticked off about the narrative around West Virginia. Mm-hmm. And he wasn't trying to sell anything other than just watch us play.
Right.
Just watch us play and tell me what you think about our team when we do that. Well, don't tell me about 2022. Tell me about 2023.
One of the things he brought up, and I'm not sure how it's worked, but was that they had their entire offensive line was back, and how important that is in the game of football. And like having your point guard back in basketball, except in football, there's 5 bodies. And he was angry. He wasn't like over the top, but I agree. It wasn't just a coach acting like bitter or whatever. He was frustrated because of how people viewed his program.
Yeah, I think he was genuinely frustrated. I also think he knew what kind of ammunition he had because of that. Like it's boiling down to like the wrong background color on their background drop at media days, which that is disrespectful that they didn't get that right. So like, whatever works, but we've often talked about like kind of the silly motivational nature of coaches and like how they'll like look for any sign of disrespect, but
like
they really
were smart in Georgia.
Yeah, exactly. But like they really were getting disrespected. Like they like, you know what? All these new teams that haven't played at the Big 12 level, they're all going to be better than you. Just except for Houston. I never got on board that they'd be worse than Houston, but I think he's off. I actually went to coach's hot seat for the first time in a long time. It looks like they've revamped this bad boy. I don't know when they did that, but he's not even on there. At this point, he's not even on the list.
Good.
Dave Aranda's on there at number 9, which I don't even know how realistic that is, quite frankly, even before last Saturday. But, he's not even on that list anymore, and it does seem like he's thrown some water on that little burgeoning fire that was building in Morgantown for at least the time being.
Yeah, absolutely. Billy Napier's at number 3, by the way. I'm not ready to buy that one yet.
Yeah, I think it's a work in progress because some of these, are not quite as automatic as you think.
Yeah. Number 3. Houston's got big problems.
Yeah.
They've got big problems. They've got a roster problem that they did not. I don't think, and I'm not blaming Dana Holgerson for this because some of this is you just can't withstand it. It's stuff that happens from the outside, but they really should have come into the Big 12 last year when you have Clayton Tune and Tank Dell and those guys that would have been better for them. When you're Houston and you have a guy, Clayton Tune, who's 4-year starter, Tank Dell, who is going to be one of the more exciting rookies in the NFL, it looks like, this season, and playing with C.J. Stroud. Like, those are just two of the guys. Alton McCaskill now goes to Colorado. So you've lost, and he wouldn't play last year anyway.
He was a big player for you the year before.
But he was a big player the year before. So, like, all these things that you had going as you entered are off, and, like, it's easier to flip the script, but they struggled at the beginning of last year when they had a lot of those guys. You know, they had those struggles. So how long does Dana Holgorsen hold this off? We even heard, look, Chris Pesman even said that he knows that Dana Holgorsen isn't nuts about this, the way that college football works right now.
Right.
He's got tons of money, so maybe, you know, one day he just says that that's it. But Houston, in the early stages of the Big 12 for them, has real problems now. It's probably a shorter fix than it used to be. But again, you have to have the right people in place to do that.
Yeah, you know, like Donovan Smith started off pretty hot, but then eventually Tech, you know, got onto him. And
boy, he did start lightning fast.
He started off really well. I mean, that was a fun first half, and then, you know, it was like, what, Tech scored 7 in the third, shut them out, scored 7 in the fourth, shut them out, and that was the second half, was 14-0 shutout. But the first half, like, yeah, I mean, they started off well, and I think what Dana said, like, really the main message, I guess, coming out of that game, and fans won't love it, but he's like, we need Big 12 bodies. Like, we're just not built up like they are. And, you know, they got embarrassed on special teams. That was, I think he said, was as bad as he'd seen since they'd been there. So, you know, those were a couple of the reasons that he pointed out. But, yeah, it's not good right now. I know fans aren't loving just the whole trajectory at the moment, and I know he just doesn't give a you-know-what, you know, pay me my buyout or whatever, but it is very kind of just, you could feel something sort of bubbling if they're not careful, and maybe even if they are careful, it doesn't matter. But, yeah, they're going to have to figure some things out down in H-Town.
Number 2, OU's offense is revving up. 50 points. That's, I mean, like, they've already done it, but 50 points against Iowa State. Craig, you mentioned it. Iowa State has given them headaches the last few years, whether it's losing to Iowa State or barely winning against Iowa State. They've had problems, and they just dropped 50 on them. And while they don't have the running game that they would like to have yet, or necessarily the take over a game running back, and they lost a couple good ones in the last couple years. Especially Eric Gray, I especially think was really good for that offense.
That's where Oklahoma fans get like upset. You say, well, they don't have the same talent. It's like, it's not saying they don't have talent. It's saying they don't have like CeeDee Lamb, you know, like Eric Gray necessarily. And look, that doesn't mean other guys can't turn into those guys. But at the start of the season, they didn't have those proven guys.
Yeah.
Now they're starting to have some guys show up regularly and turning into those types of guys.
Yeah.
I watched the full game. I was accused last week of making a comment about Oklahoma, and I had not watched but a half of their game. I watched much more about Oklahoma than you could ever imagine. I watched a ton, like basically the entire game. I was a little bit taken aback by how many big gains and big chunks of yards they gave up on defense. And then they eventually, you know,
Look,
I guess they responded. But they do that early against Texas, and they're going to need to score 45 or 50 points.
Look, before you can completely suffocate someone on defense, which I don't think is necessarily possible week in and week out in college football, even for the best defenses in college football right now. Look, Michigan's got a great defense. When they get into playing Penn State, they're not going to completely suffocate Penn State.
No.
You know, that's just hard. But you have to, the first thing you fix, Phil Bennett did this at Baylor. Okay, you can move between the 20s. I may not be able to stop you.
Right.
But when the field is shorter and you have less space to work with,
right,
that's where we're going to get you off the field.
Red zone defense. Give up field goals, not touchdowns, or at least most of the time.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's what they've done a lot better this season.
Yeah, and I do think their receiving course coming along. You got guys like Anthony and others that are starting to, you know, be like, I guess, you know, names and guys that are developing into your star type of players or your playmakers. It's not stars necessarily, but your playmakers. That's, you're starting to see that identity coming forward. But yeah, the running game's still a work in progress. But they've definitely made big strides. I know you say they gave up some chunks in there, but they're still clearly way better than they've been in the last 2-3 years under Lincoln Riley defensively.
Those chunks didn't end,
or last year even too.
Those chunks didn't end in the field of play, Smokey. They ended with the other team on the sideline high-fiving each other last year. Yeah. That's the difference.
Yeah,
that's a big difference.
No, that's probably a pretty good point. It will be interesting to see. The Oklahoma defense, can they get a couple of stops early and this doesn't turn into like in the past, they've had shootouts, and OU's been fine. They can win a game 55-50 against them. But that's what I will be watching. Can they run the ball? Because we know how good Texas has been against the run on defense.
Yeah. Number 1, Texas is not messing around. Okay, so they play an uneven or uninspiring maybe half to their fans against Kansas, who's a good team, but without their starting quarterback. And Jason Bean's got him hanging in.
That was such a bummer, too.
I
When
know.
they were like, oh, all of a sudden he's out with the back. Like, did we have any inclination that was the case? Or it was just like, boom, he was out?
No, that was that seemed to be like a last-second deal. Yeah.
And Jason Bean's like a very, like, if you're going to have a solid backup quarterback, like he's about, outside of the programs that have like 5 stars waiting in the wings, like that's about as sturdy of a backup quarterback who's started multiple games as you could have. But yeah, go ahead, Paul. Sorry.
Yeah, so, but what good teams do is when they start slow, they respond quickly. And I think the narrative of halftime adjustments has been overplayed a little bit. But for good teams, it's not really about halftime adjustments. It's just going in and wrangling those emotions a little bit or getting out of your own head. And then a coach walking over and going, hey, the next time 75 comes across your face, do this. And then they change it, right? So those are the things that happen that are really subtle, but it's not a coach in the locker room drawing up something that he thought of that they haven't practiced. That's not really what happens. But Texas, when they respond with vigor. And I think that there are times that with Jason Bean at quarterback at Kansas and a Texas team that was heavily favored to beat them, only beating them by 6 at halftime, that game would have wound up 29-28 Kansas in double overtime. And everybody's talking about, well, that was stupid how that ended. And Texas is left, holding the bag again.
And a former walk-on's got an Applebee's deal all of a sudden.
Yeah, all that would have happened. This Texas team said, nope, not this time. Go. And they stepped on the accelerator in the second half.
It honestly reminds me of like their glory days in the early 2000s where, you got them close at halftime, and then it's like, oh, well, the second half still has to play out. Yeah. And then, boom, they just jet off, and you don't have the guns or the ammo, the weapons, however you want to describe it, to keep up, to keep pace with them. Oklahoma should be a team that's built to do that. So this weekend is going to be amazing to watch these two go against each other, because I do think there's still so many questions about like Texas is clearly good and Oklahoma is clearly better, but compared to each other, sort of where are they, right?
Yeah.
And where's both of them in terms of like the national landscape? Like Texas obviously ranked high, Oklahoma's up nearly the top 10 at this point, but like where are they, against each other? I think is a burning question. And also one, for the remainder of the Big 12, because obviously whoever wins this is in the driver's seat after Saturday. But, Texas, they look really good. Now you got Jonathan Brooks this last, 2-3 games, really turning it on and turning into like a reliable, just star running back for them. And,
violent runner.
Yeah.
He's violent.
Oh, yeah. And so, like, they just don't have a ton. I know Coach Bennett pointed out like the edges, can sometimes, but I mean, for the most part, they don't really have any weaknesses. And Quinn Ewers didn't have like a big statistical game, but he had a really sharp, smooth, good game. He threw a pick, his first pick, but outside of that, he got some damage on the ground with a couple big touchdown runs.
Yeah, he's now become a little bit of a problem because you have to cover so many weapons everywhere. He is not afraid to take off and has some speed to do something with it.
Busted off like, what was it, like a 30-yarder or something in that game? So, yeah, I mean, they're really salty, man, and I'm fascinated to see how Oklahoma stacks up with them on Saturday.
I'll tell you this, though. Here's one of the things about I just went and looked at the box score. Oklahoma gave up touchdowns of 51 and 67 yards and a 39-yard run, and that is a problem. And now Bowman had the pick six early, so they're creating things on defense despite giving up that. That, to me, has to be – they're giving up the big play, even to Iowa State, who is okay as an okay team. All right, Paul, thank you very much. Welcome back, Jack McKenzie, I think. Also, Emery Winter, thank you for being a part of it.